Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to the
To
perimenopause.
perimenopause, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we can choose some symptoms. Like I think one of the main symptoms is hot flashes. So can you make an example if women don't want to start take hormones because they have hot flashes? What can they try out first? What can they change in their
Yeah.
lives to do something about it?
Yeah. So I think it helps to rather than go through it kind of symptom by symptom, because I might try to approach it with, like I do in the book, as just kind of explaining what's going on here. So it's a there's nothing about the transition or it's so it's a transition. Perimenopause is for one thing, I just want to kind of back up a little bit. And this all does lead
Yeah.
to, what treatments can women
Yes.
choose?
Okay.
So, I mean, we're going towards treatment. I get that. That's what women just want to know. I know from working with women for
Yeah.
30 years and my books that women do just want to know what should I do? And I get that. But like, I just want to, because there's this at the moment, and again, I don't know what you're seeing in Germany, but like, there's this weird narrative that menopause is a deficiency, there's a disease state almost. And that is incorrect from a scientific perspective. Like I said, I'm a biologist, I'm an evolutionary biologist. So I see everything through the lens of that. Um, there, just to be clear, I mean, without getting too like humans evolved to have menopause. So it's totally normal. It's not a disease state. It is totally normal to be post reproductive for women to be post reproductive, be in a lower estrogen state for 3 or 4
Yes.
decades. That has been happening since as long as we've been human. That's probably been happening for a few 100,000 years. So that is not new. There's, I mean, there's this thing, everyone used to die by 45. That is not true. Um, like that anyway, that's a statistical thing. I mean, a lot of the average used to be, I mean, most people used to die when they were children, actually. Like, so sadly, historically, a lot of
Yeah.
people used to die young, but there have always been individuals, as far as we can tell from the historical and archaeological record that and fossil record, like there have always been individuals who made it through to 80. That's how long humans live.
Yes.
And that's how long women, and probably what the science suggests is that the longer lifespan in humans than kind of our ape relatives is from women. It's actually because women, it's getting women to keep living for a few more decades after they stop having their own babies is super beneficial for humans. And that was so the long lived genes in women were selected for. I do think it's worth sharing that piece of information just to really reframe this. Like, we are meant to do this, and there is
Yeah.
nothing about it that should be symptomatic. It's the best way to characterize perimenopause is, as I do in the book, is it's second puberty. So first puberty is a big change from being a child to being a reproductive adult, and there's a lot of hormonal changes going on there, and that can be symptomatic. Obviously, teens can have, during puberty there can be neurological symptoms. It's a neurological transition phase. That's what both puberty and perimenopause are now sort of categorized as. So first puberty is a neurological hormonal transition phase, and so is perimenopause, or what I call second puberty. So if you kind of think of it like puberty, or puberty in reverse, some people say,
Yeah.
it kind of repositions it. Like, it's not a disease, but it is a momentous change.
Yeah, and there
And
are the symptoms like memory loss, like you
so,
don't remember things. And so,
yeah,
like in puberty, really.
exactly. So the brain is going through a massive remodeling
Yes.
and rewiring. And there are, I guess the way I would present it is, so we know historically, actually, women didn't report any symptoms. I mean, it might just be that maybe no one was writing it down or asking them. It was always that possibility. But like, there is a book, if people are interested in this, there's a book called The Slow Moon Climbs. You can put it in the show notes.
Yes.
She does a really deep dive. She's a historian. She just looks at, like, from all cultures all around the world. Most other cultures, women are pretty happy about menopause. They know it happens around 45 or 50, your periods stop. They don't report any symptoms. They're generally pretty happy about it, actually. So I mean, it's because, it's in some cultures it's second spring, it's, second childhood, second girlhood. I have a whole section in my book called Return to Girlhood. So there's it's the fact that it's so symptomatic for a lot of women in our society is actually because of our modern various factors in our modern world that are having a negative impact on our health. And this is an area where it's manifesting. Does that make sense? Like, I think if everything
Yes.
was good, like if we didn't have all these extra pressures and unhealthy things that are, affecting us, like environmental toxins, for example, but there's others, then it wouldn't be symptomatic. So, I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is just because it does sort of start to say, well, the way to actually reduce symptoms is to optimize, like get health, like through whatever way is possible, improve health, support health generally. And that will often reduce the neurological symptoms. And I can give some, and obviously in the book, I do provide some specific examples.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
you're talking
like,
about stress, internal pressure, ca
yeah, so
circadian rhythms,
the circadian rhythm, yeah.
circadian
So the
rhythms.
other one okay, another one that I'll just point out is alcohol. Like, I think, so alcohol, I mean, I have the occasional alcohol. Like, so I mean, I'm not, so the thing is, alcohol is a poison. So I mean, I think a lot of humans, we can get away with it at different times in our life and a certain amount, and it's probably not that big a deal. But what I have observed clinically, and every naturopath I've talked to, or every almost woman I've talked to, has just observed that during this transition phase specifically, the brain is not tolerant to alcohol. Like, it really disrupts sleep more. And so that's an example of, like, a tip is just, I would say, even though, I mean, obviously alcohol can feel good when you're like anxious and not sleeping, and but it's actually very corrosive, or it's impairing the transition. So that's one easy tip. But other things that are like modern factors that are creating symptoms in modern women during a transition phase that should not be inherently symptomatic, would be environmental toxins. There's quite a bit of research around that, actually. And that's not nobody's fault that we've been exposed to those, right? Like, there's some research to suggest, it's quite an interesting, it's a couple of papers that, um, particularly my generation, I mean, sort of, so I was a kid in the 1970s. There was a lot of lead around then. I don't know, again, I don't know what it was like in Germany, but like certainly in Canada where I
Yes.
grew up, in
Yeah.
certain parts,
Also here. Yes.
we
Mhm.
had leaded petroleum, like leaded gasoline, like, so lead in the paint, lead, like, so we do know that this generation and probably earlier, like, um were exposed to lead, some of
Yeah.
us. And just to give an example of what's going on here, so the that's stored in the bones. So when you're like a kid, the body's like puts the lead in the bones to, like, just, get it out, put it away. And then during perimenopause, when, because of the hormonal changes, bone starts reduced, like turning over, what they call turning over, like more bone is being liberated, basically. And some of that lead goes back into the system and could be creating some of the neurological symptoms. So in that sense, through that lens, just supporting general health and detoxification pathways. And so, for example, in the book, I do talk about, just ways, simple things. It doesn't have to be complicated, but like a bit of selenium, the nutrient selenium, and getting enough protein, and something called N-acetylcysteine can help shelter from that particular environmental toxin. So it's, I guess my point being, it's not just environmental toxins we're exposed to currently, but it's like what we're exposed to throughout our lifetime that can also create, I mean, a lot of this is not within our direct control, reasons why women are symptomatic today, but I think some of it is. So, and other things are changes to the microbiome. And then obviously the big one is changes to the food environment. So our modern, I mean, this kind of now goes into the topic of, ultra processed food and the damage to metabolic health that's happening on a collective scale, like just population wide scale, is impacts female hormones as well, right? Like everything does. Like, female hormones are not separate from the rest of the body.
Yes.
So whatever's having all these negative metabolic effects, which is why my third book's on metabolic health, because it affects everything, will affect hot flushes. So back to the like, what can you do about hot flushes or
Yeah.
hot flashes, depending where you live in the world in English? Um, like for example, having what's called insulin resistance or metabolic dysfunction increases the likelihood of hot flashes. So in that case, I mean, treating the underlying metabolic health can really improve things. And at the end of the day, there's some simple takeaways that can help with hot flashes. Um, One of them is magnesium. I think in part by the way it calms the nervous system, it helps, you know, detoxify environmental toxins. It improves insulin health, metabolic health. It's promotes sleep. So I think I even say in the book, like my experience with my patients is if the hot flashes are fairly mild, you know, some women just don't want to take hormone therapy. So they just want to start with something simpler. I'll be like, right, okay, so take magnesium, um, move your body. Doesn't, I mean, I'm not super prescriptive about the type of exercise, but like maybe getting outside. I talk about in the book about the importance of getting outside and getting outdoor light. And
Yeah.
actually I personally found when I was in the middle of perimenopause, I just wanted to be outside all the time, like a kid kind of like, just like I just need to be like going for walks. And
Yeah.
some people talk about like they need to be gardening, just this urge to get outside. And then quit alcohol. And so those three things, kind of magnesium, moving the body, getting outside, four things, I guess, quitting alcohol. My observation is at least 50, if with just with that alone, 50% of my patients would be like, oh, I'm fine now. Like I feel fine.
Yeah.
Um, so I
And
mean,
it's
not everyone.
easy. It's not so difficult to
That's
do
not
this.
difficult at all. And it just makes you feel good in other ways. So I mean, obviously some people need more help than that. So if people are
Yeah.
listening and thinking, oh, that's too easy, you know, that wouldn't help me. That fair enough. I mean, some people do need more help
Yeah.
than that. But it just to go back to my what I was saying before, there's nothing inherently symptomatic about perimenopause. Like it can some women, and to be fair, some women don't notice any symptoms at all, which is totally makes sense because it's you know that's it's a
Yeah.
natural transition. It's just kind of you know an analogy would be I also say, and in my first book, periods should not be inherently symptomatic. I mean, there shouldn't periods shouldn't be painful or difficult, you know, mood symptoms or difficult really in any way. They commonly are difficult.
Yeah.
And again, not really through people's fault or anything, but
Mhm.
the default should be yeah, not symptomatic. So I actually recently, but it's the conversation in social media has progressed to the point that like there's so much discussion about how terrible I don't know if this is happening in Germany, but like how a lot of discussion I'm seeing is about how terrible perimenopause is, how strong the symptoms are, to the point that I had someone ask me on social media, she's like, and again, this just really speaks to how women, as women, we always think there's something wrong with us. So she said, you know, clearly I'm in perimenopause, you know, I'm 48, my periods are coming only every 3 or 4 months now. She said, but I feel fine. Like, does that mean something's wrong? I'm like, no, nothing's wrong.
You're
Like
fine. Yeah.
you're
So,
fine.
but
Yeah.
that's actually a point because a lot of women are really afraid of the
Yeah.
perimenopause and the menopause, and
Yeah.
they are scared because there's so much talk about the disadvantages and about the
Yeah.
symptoms and how terrible it all is. So
Yeah.
maybe you can draw also a picture of menopause, of the freedom of menopause, and
Yeah.
I mean, I heard you once say, I personally, you said it, I graduated to menopause. And
Yes.
I really love that sentence because it's so positive and it's so strong and it's a
Yeah.
totally different approach. So could you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
Yeah. So that phrase, actually, the graduated to menopause, that came from Geraldine Pryor. So I need to try to give her, I need to reference her properly, give her the yeah, credit for that.
Yeah.
So she has another beautiful quote which says that the turbulent time of perimenopause ends in a kinder and calmer phase of life called menopause or post-menopause. Partly what's happening here, and again, I don't know in German if this would be the same, but um, there's a big confusion about the words in English. Like, so, you know, people talk about, sometimes a lot of people, and for different, there's reasons for this, but a lot of people use the word menopause when they're actually talking about perimenopause.
Yeah.
And so when Geraldine talks about graduating to menopause, she means graduating to postmenopause, basically, like 1 year after your final
Yes.
period. You've gone through the turbulent years, what we saw in the chart, that, you know, the
Yeah.
estrogen going up and down. Things are starting to really stabilize. And so it's, the stabilization starts about, yeah, around that 1 year after the final period. But I'll be honest, my observation with patients and with myself, the stabilization really starts about 3 or 4 years after the final period. There is this new, yeah, it's like a second spring, or this, yeah, this new stability. I mean, Geraldine Pryor talks about the low estrogen years as a gift to women. You know, we get to, periods are great. I'm a huge fan of periods and, you know, ovarian hormones, but they have their place, and we're not meant to be on, you know, full speed ahead with hormones for our whole life. We get to have this next phase of life where hormones are lower and more stable. And to be clear, the body can adapt. The body, we evolved to do this, actually. So, and specifically in humans, because most animals don't have menopause, but the, yeah, our body knows what to do. It has it's, and we can work with the lower level. It's not it's not zero estrogen. The body can work with the lower amount of estrogen if everything is going well. One thing that people might not realize, kind of a fun fact, all cells in the body make their own estrogen, including brain cells make their own estrogen. So it is less than what they had during the reproductive years, of course. But um, yeah, it can, a lot of women, honestly, even my patients, a lot of women really love menopause, because, or postmenopause, especially women who've had period problems. Then they're just like, oh, that is all behind me. Like, no more heavy bleeding or terrible premenstrual mood symptoms. You know, they just, it's like this, yeah, like you get a second life. You get to sort of do things quite differently. I know I recently, a couple of years ago, I went to Greenland and trekking and camping. And I was, more than once, I'm like, oh, thank goodness, I'm not going to get my period. Like, this
Yeah.
is really great. Like, you know, I used to, because anyone who's done a lot of camping, or, you know, periods are, I mean, as great as they are in lots of ways, they're also hard. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of the women I've talked to, and I do have a whole chapter in the book about the freedom
Yeah.
pause. And there's kind
So
of different
the
stages.
spirit is
Yeah,
also changing, I think.
yeah,
The
yes, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that could, I mean, something quite profound happens. I think there's different language to use to describe that. Um, is that what you mean by spirit? Like, the people, women do,
Probably.
yeah,
Yeah,
they
but
tap into something. Like, women will tap into something, kind of their, like, often women will kind of turn towards more helping their community, or it depends, I mean, on the individual, or like maybe turn towards their art, or like, especially women who've been, you know, spent a lot of years raising kids, and now you actually get to like do something that you're passionate about. There's different ways to channel that energy, I think. But yeah, it's real. And just to circle back, I have to circle back to the evolution, the fact that we evolved to do this. And when you read the papers about that and the book I mentioned, The Slow Moon Climbs, she makes the observation that human society, so the current, you know, I mean, we can't go back in time and see what people, you know, were, how people were living
yeah.
100,000 years ago, but we can look at people alive today who live a very traditional modern day forager people, like the Hadza in Tanzania. And so we know what they're doing. And we know from all those groups all around the world that women in their 50s, 60s, and into 70s are holding it all together for everybody. Like, they are, like, some of the quotes from the scientists is like, what would these groups do without their, like, grandmas,
Yeah.
basically? Like, these women are getting everything done. They gather more food than any other demographic. You know, they just really, they're holding it all together. And they think that's why it evolved, because older women with the wisdom, and also turning their attention to support the whole group. It's a huge part of humanity. And it's not ancient history. Like, I mean, that's how it evolved. That's how menopause evolved. But I mean, now women are still embodying that. And if you look around, I mean, if I always ask people, like, if you just think about it, like you look around your circle, your community or your family or your work, there's always those like women in their 50s and 60s who are getting a lot done, like who are just like, holding it all together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's also a freedom because they do it because they want to do it and they can do it. And they have
Yeah.
and they have the power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.